Welcome to the Rider's Edge podcast, a platform to share conversations about the health and wellness of horse and rider. I'm your host, Farley Schweigert. Hey y'all, it's Farley with the Rider's Edge podcast. How's it going? Hashtag in the arena 365. I would love to know what your journey looks like. So tag me in your stories at Rider's Edge and bring in the hashtag in the arena 365. Let's see what's going on in your arena. Today we're going to talk a little bit about hip flexors and how they affect our in the arena journey. Our hip flexors are a group of muscles that do just that. They flex our hip or bend it. And these group of muscles are located in the front of your hip. There are several of them that run through there. And there's one in particular that we'll talk about several times today. And that's the iliopsoas muscle. Sometimes just referred to as the psoas muscle. It's spelled P-S-O-A-S for you sciencey nerds out there. If my southern accent gets in the way of pronunciation, which it does sometimes. But anywho, the psoas muscle or the iliopsoas is a muscle that is, it originates on the front of the lumbar spine, the front of the low back, and comes down. It's kind of like a fan that comes down and it narrows down as it comes across the front of your pelvis and connects on your femur or your thigh bone. And it's really one of the major muscles and basically the only one that connects your spine to your lower extremities. We have other ones that help our hip flexion. But it's a major connector. It does a couple different things. It works on your low back motion along with your hip motion. So it's a pretty complicated muscle. We've also found that this muscle can tighten. It can get tight and weak. It can. I tend to find when I work with clients and even working through some of my own issues, this muscle in this area of the body can harbor a lot of emotion. It can harbor a lot of cellular memories. And working through that, people can become emotional, old memories, old childhood traumas, things like that can come up because for a lot of reasons, but what I believe in particularly is that when we get stressed, we tend to tighten our abdominal muscles, our hip flexors, or pelvic muscles, and kind of bear down and hold that. That may be just something that I've dealt with over the years, but I don't think I'm the only one. I think that can be a pretty common occurrence. So the hip flexors, again, they're super important because riding happens in a flexed hip. Riding happens in you're bent at the hip and it doesn't, and that's across the disciplines, whether we're talking about reining, horsemanship, western pleasure, running barrels, roping, dressage, show jumping, eventing. The angles change and some of the properties of what's considered proper riding change a little bit, but across the board, horsemanship and rider position, correct horsemanship and correct rider position is pretty universal with some small changes depending upon the discipline. Additionally, as Americans, we have tight, weak hip flexors basically across the board. Why? Because we're a sedentary society. Whether you are part of the 2% of professional rodeo athletes, that's not a hard and fast statistic, but if you're part of the professional athlete group that you do this for a living, then you are more truck driver than rodeo rock star often, which puts you at a more flexed hip position. You are at 90 degrees of hip flexion or greater, depending upon your truck seat. Whether you're a professional in this industry, as in a trainer, veterinarian, anything like that, and you get a lot of drive time, that puts you in again that same tight and weak position. Whether you are like the 98% of the population that has to have day jobs to pay for their horse habits, and often majority of the time that comes with a desk job, or a lot of the time it does, maybe not majority, but a lot of the time it comes with a desk job, or it comes with long commutes to jobs that are very habitual, or different things like that. So if you are a desk jockey and then you drive home and then you go out to the barn and you ride, you are continuing all day, every day, no matter what your schedule is, to enforce that the hip flexors have to tighten up to cause stability because they are weak, because we were not using them properly. And we've talked about this before. Proximal stability leads to distal mobility. The body's going to find a way to be stable. Whether it's the correct way or not, the body really doesn't care. It's going to find a way to protect itself, to become stable, to get whatever the task is completed. So we haven't looked at hip flexors enough, in my opinion. That's why we're talking about them today through the Writer's Edge content. And I'll kind of tell you my journey with my hip flexors and what I've learned and am continuing to learn, because this has been an evolving process, kind of if you've been following along with my In the Arena 365 journey the past couple months, through the ups and downs of the rope pen, Charlie getting hurt and different things. This will kind of fit in along with all of that stuff. But I'll give you a little bit of history. So when I got to PT school, I was kind of coming back into riding. I didn't have a lot of ride time in undergrad, and it was a stress reliever for me in PT school. And I had a classmate who had been a personal trainer on South Beach, had a lot of wonderful exercise expertise. And I got him to help me make a program to work out and get better at my riding and different things. And he'd never been around riding, but he'd been in an elite Olympic athlete level as well previously to PT school. So a lot of knowledge, learned a lot from him. And within his program, he first thing off the bat, he said, "Your hip flexors are too tight." And I was like, "Okay, what do I need to do?" And gave me my program, gave me my stretches, and I was actually a compliant patient, a compliant client for once. For I don't even remember now, but probably 2 to 3 months. Went to the gym on campus, did what I was told, all that good stuff. Got my hip flexors stretched out. And it felt better. I'm not gonna lie. It felt better. I was like, "Oh yeah, we're on the path here." And in the middle of all this, I go to a Connie Combs barrel racing clinic, and we're doing a drill at this clinic, and then I don't even remember the drill, but part of the component that I was on was you had to lope up to the fence and stop. And I was on a younger horse, and you know how younger horses, before, if they're concerned about loping into a wall, they get kind of scotchy and they'll duck and dive a little bit and kind of, it dang sure won't be a straight line as our front end's going from right to left across there because they were unsure of what to do. And in this particular situation, it was not a hard thing to ride. I've done it before, I've done it since. But on that day, I dang near fell off. And I was very frustrated with that because the situation presented, it was not, this horse was not being bronky or spooky or anything. It was just unsure. And it's not a hard scotching deal to ride through. But I mean, grabbing saddle horn, dang near fell off. And I was like, well, screw this. This is it. We're tightening these suckers back up because it's messing with my riding. And that's the thing, right? If you mess with our riding, we're out. We out. And so I quit doing that. And later on, probably a year later, I had my SI injury and have kind of dealt with that off and on for a long time until finally learning how to deal with it, how to treat it properly as we've become more educated about the pelvis and the SI. So fast forward through a lot of things to these last few months as I've been working on getting better in the rope pen, and I've talked about on here and in my Facebook group about core stability and what that actually means and how that actually looks at piecing it together, not just doing sit-ups all day, not just doing planks, but actually putting all those components together correctly. And gosh, I've been working through this and it's getting better. And the last 2 weeks, I've been noticing that on my right side, which is my problematic area, my hip flexors, and I feel like it's my iliopsoas from anatomy, but it could definitely not be. But I have about a 4-inch, and it feels like the insertion of that iliopsoas, got about 4 inches of that muscle that when I get fatigued, or when I come out of the rope pen, or even when I come from just roping the dummy, just standing on my own 2 feet roping the dummy, I feel this twinge, kind of. It's not a great pain. It's not a drop you to your knees kind of deal, but it's a twinge. And I felt it doing different exercises on the table as well. So I've been working through that, and I came across some other movement professionals talking about hip flexors. And I've always talked to my clients about, becoming flexible in your hip flexors. Now, I don't typically, on a general level, haven't taken it to the extreme that I did in PT school. But when appropriate, we address that and work on that and try to find functional ways. One of my favorite ways to have people stretch out their hip flexors and the front of their body is to just lay on their belly, to have some tummy time, to help just stretch out all that fascia, all that musculature. So I've been working through a hip flexor flow of different dynamic stretching, static stretching exercises, really opening up those hip flexors. But knowing what I know now, it's not a repeat of what happened to me in PT school, because I follow up that flow with my stability exercises. So I get all the fascia, all the tissue moving and flowing and actually working at the capacity that those structures were created. And then I follow it up with repetitions of how things should stabilize. Now, I'm here to tell you it's not perfect, but it is getting better. And we're even above a 1% improvement every time we revisit it. So that's kind of fun. But So I've got my flexibility flow along with my stability flow after that. And I always follow up with stability. Even after as returning back to my day job and having to sit at a desk a little bit more than I've been used to over the past few months. I've been taking breaks and doing some of those dynamic movements throughout the day, and I can tell a big difference. So after doing this a couple times, when I returned back to the arena of riding, I felt a huge, huge difference in my riding. I felt like I felt like I was bearing weight through my pelvis more symmetrically. I've seen pictures of myself just riding casually, and I've not been symmetrical from the midline. Typically, I weight off of my right side. Sometimes I overcompensate and weight more on my right side, but typically it's off towards the left. And I felt more symmetrical, which is going to help my horse's posture and carriage. I also felt like my pelvis kind of dropped down and wrapped more around my horse. Very much like it kind of cupped around my horse more than just kind of sitting on top or sitting in a straight line on top of my horse. The other thing that happened, and we've talked about the glute muscles before, is that when I was posting at a trot, my glute muscles, I believe for the first time in my riding career, automatically fired and worked with posting, which is what they're supposed to do. Now, I have gotten them to fire and engage with that before, but it's had to be a very conscious effort to do that. And it just naturally happened. And let me tell you what, when you work through all these things and your muscles start to work properly, it's a lot less taxing. It takes a lot less energy to do that than how your body's normal is if it's not the correct normal of muscle firing patterns. It was a lot more effortless. I felt like I have a bad habit of leading often. I don't do it all the time anymore, but it rears its ugly head once in a while. I have a bad habit of leading with my upper body. Like when I ask for a trot, I will squeeze with my legs, and then I will lead with my shoulders instead of my pelvis, and a little bit of a forward lean. I've had trouble with that with my barrel racing, and I've dang sure lately had trouble with my roping. Because some reason I feel like if I lean forward with my roping, I'm going to get closer to the calf, and it's going to make catching it easier. And that is not at all how that works. At all. So I didn't feel like that was happening at all. I felt like I was leading with my pelvis, and it was just natural and easy and smooth. I've noticed that I've slept sounder, and I'll do a couple of those flow exercises before I go to bed to keep my hips freed up. Because if you get that flexibility flowing and moving, well, it's a temporary thing and you have to repeat it. If you will do that before you go to sleep, no matter what position you sleep, you're not in a seated position. You're laying on your back, your side, your stomach. And so if you've opened up your hips, they can rest in a more open position without getting mashed down in a seated position. So my sleep has improved. My walking has improved. I just feel freer and flow freer. But most importantly, and why you come back to the Writer's Edge podcast every week, is my writing improved. And the difference between what I told you earlier about being in PT school and how things are changing now is that I followed it up with stability. And as that stability becomes a more ingrained habit, the strength will improve and get stronger. And that tightness, while will have to be managed because of all the factors going against it, like I said, driving, a sedentary job, sitting on the couch watching the Cowboy Channel, whatever, it will have to be managed from that. But getting getting that stability behind that, which will get it strengthened, will decrease the tightness, will decrease the operating system that is currently in place in my body, which is we're going to tighten up because we are weak and we need proximal stability. We need trunk stability before we can go do anything with our arms or our legs. Again, we have to have proximal stability for distal mobility. So maybe this is resonating with you. Maybe this is resonating with you and you don't know how it's resonating with you yet. Because maybe you are a writer who can't get to the next level, can't get some of these postural habits like I've had in my writing corrected, and it's super frustrating to you. It may be that you have a movement pattern off. It may not be. It may not present just like mine. We're all individuals. And it's very interesting to watch compensation patterns and to dive deep into people's histories of different events in their lives. And it doesn't even have to be, I'm not talking about just about trauma, but just different events in people's lives and how that continues to affect them, and in their pursuits that they want to do. So maybe you're sitting there going, okay, Farley, this makes a lot of sense, and I know I have something going on, but I don't know what it is. That's when you need to reach out to me. We can do this over the internet, over video, over secure video. You can send me videos of your writing, and we can analyze that and go through what's going on and build a wellness program for you, build you a performance enhancement program. Now it takes work and it takes diving into it and working at it, but it's not any different than what the work you're putting in on your horse. It's not any different than working at getting a horse to do a task to the level that you need them to. Maybe you're sitting there going, okay, Farles, I have some stiffness. It's not pain, but it's stiffness. Or you're going, okay, Farles, I do have pain. It's in my left hip, not my right hip. Or you're sitting there raising your hand right now going, yes, I have an issue in my right hip. It doesn't matter. What matters is recognizing the problem and then getting somebody on your team to help you assess and address the problem and help you with the belief in yourself to fix it. And fix the hard word. It can be a harsh word. Address the problem. Assess it and then take action with the problem. Because in the action comes the process, and that's where we live our lives, is in the process of becoming a better rider. If we become a better rider, we become a better horseman. If we become a better horseman, our horses perform to a higher level, we can accomplish our goals and go as far as we dare to dream to go. So, what are your hip flexors doing? You may have all this already figured out. You may be like, man, Farley, I agree with everything you're saying, but I've got hip flexors of steel. Um, and so you may hit the jackpot. And for that, I want you to tell me how you did it, because I always love to hear how people have figured out to address different things, because that's how we learn, is in the process, in the moment. And people have different ways to get to the same destination. And I think that's what's so cool about training horses, about training riders, and figuring out how we get to our destination. It was very fascinating to me. You may be sitting here going, Farls, you do a great job explaining things, but this still doesn't make sense to me. And that's okay. Let's hop on a call and let's see if it makes sense to you. If this may not be your problem, but it may be something further down the kinetic chain, or even further up, that may be an issue. Your hip flexors are typically tight and weak. They can also be just tight, and you can have weak glutes. There are so many different structures that are all interrelated. How your fascia works within your muscles affects everything. The tightness and or weakness of muscle fibers affect your fascia, affect your movement patterns. How all this operates can affect you viscerally, can affect how your GI tract operates, how your reproductive tract operates, and any issues that you may be having internally, particularly in the lower thorax area, in the lower abdominal pelvic regions. It's all interrelated. And for someone who has had her fair share, and fair is not a good word for that, but her share of GI issues, riding. GI issues and riding do not mix well. The concussion force, the perturbations of riding make GI pain very uncomfortable, more uncomfortable than it already was to begin with. So it's, again, all of these structures are related, and it's fascinating to me, and I love talking about it. It's getting things mobile and flexible and following it up with stability. And as stability becomes more prominent, strength is going to come. And that's the order that it needs to happen for it to stick, for you to finally work through some very old integrated movement patterns, to curve them, to change your riding, to change your results. It's the same thing that we need to work through with our horses as we are getting them into shape. We've got to work on their mobility and how they do things, set them up for stability in those positions, and then work on strengthening and stamina. Same principles that have to happen to have a in shape horse, which is just as important as having an in shape rider. So I hope you have enjoyed a little bit of insight into the anatomy and structure and function of the hip flexors. Again, they are the muscles on the front of your hips that are responsible for bending your hips or flexing them. They are typically weak and tight on the whole. If you're going to be a betting person, you can bet that pretty much across the board. And that affects our riding. That affects our posture, affects our running. So if you run to stay in shape, it can affect that as well. Or any other activities, CrossFit, tennis, golf. It can affect anything else that you do besides horses. All of that can lead to compensations and different patterns, like we've talked about on this program before, the human body will find a way to accomplish the task. It is typically the least energy use. I'm at a loss for words. It is the easiest path, the least amount of resistance is how the body will get the task done. That's its go-to programming, to use the least amount of energy. And it doesn't matter if it is maximizing how the structure should be used or not. That's how it's going to get the job done. So all of that can affect, again, how we ride, how we bear weight through the saddle, how we support ourselves, affects how our horses travel, affects their health, affects their performance. It's all interrelated. All of that can come from a lot of structures, but I'm here to tell you that the hip flexors are usually involved if we have something going on with our riding. So I hope you learned a little bit more about anatomy, structure, and function. If you find that fascinating, I would love for you to give me a shout out and tag me in your Instagram stories at Rider's Edge Therapy, hashtag in the arena 365. Would love to see where you guys listen to podcasts, whether it's out while you're riding or running or wherever. And I'd love to follow along with your journeys of what you're doing, your goals, what you're doing in your arena. Are you getting ready for a show? Are you getting ready for your first local show? Are you getting ready to finally go on a trail ride at a destination you've always wanted to go to? Would love to see what you guys are doing, your goals, and the process you are working through to get there. So, as always, I appreciate your time and attention, and I will see you down the road. Thank you for listening to Rider's Edge Podcast. For show notes and other thoughts, head over to ridersedgetherapy.com. If you would like to stay connected and continue the conversation, head over to my free Facebook group, Rider's Edge Health and Wellness for Horse and Rider. Thanks for continuing the conversation, and as always, I will see you down the road.